Celeste is one of the greatest platformers released in the last 10 years, but something not many people might know about it is it has a thriving modded community. Since the game's release, there's been tons of custom maps, skins, and mods made, and some of them are pretty popular. Today, I'll be talking about Glyph, a custom map made by Marshall H. This map features custom mechanics, artwork, and an entire soundtrack composed by Marshall himself. This is an incredible feat, and players could feel the passion put into this mod. But I'm not here purely to sell you on the mod. I make speedrunning videos, so let's talk speedrunning. This map is absolutely perfect for speedrunning. It's pretty difficult, rivaling the hardest levels in the base game, but it's also not too long if executed well. So, on May 6, 2020, just 5 days after the map's release, a runner named DeLuca set the first record. This run starts off pretty basic, and stays that way as far as speedrunning goes. It's mostly about trying to navigate through the 5 different sections with as few deaths as possible. After the start, DeLuca makes his way through the spring section, following the intended route but with a decent pace, and not struggling too much. Next is the summer section, where the difficulty ramps up a little. There are a few different deaths in this section, but also the first glitch of the run. This is called a demo dash. A demo dash, also known as a crouch dash, allows Madeline's hitbox to shrink from 9 pixels tall to only 4 during a sideways dash. This is useful because spinners, the little crystal things here, are a little deceptive when it comes to its hitbox. If we look at a level editor for Celeste custom maps, you can see that pre-render, they aren't actually connected, but rather just placed near each other. The visual connection of the crystals comes when the level is rendered out. What this means for us speedrunners is that sometimes there's a gap of about 4 pixels or more in any given spinner formation. So here, combining a pixel-perfect demo dash with a tiny gap in the spinners, you're able to just dash through this seemingly deadly wall. The summer section also introduces us to the main new mechanic in Glyph, portals. These basically just transport you from whatever room you're in to a different one, keeping whatever momentum you had going into it. It's a pretty simple mechanic, so DeLuca finishes out this section pretty quickly. The next section is winter for some reason. I'd usually expect autumn after summer, but I guess winter's fine. This area uses a lot of falling blocks, and it's pretty easy to get through, granted you know the pathing. Then, autumn. This section is easily the hardest so far, and uses some weird glitchy mechanics with the portals, and it makes for some really interesting puzzles and visuals. There's a cool little skip where if you go fast enough, you can barely skip the puzzle of this room by outpacing the moving block. But other than that, DeLuca runs this section pretty normally, again with a few deaths. And then the final section, referred to as memory. This is the final area of Glyph, and DeLuca gets through it with a few deaths and nothing too fancy. He finishes out with a time of 14 minutes and 48 seconds, setting the first world record of the map. This was a solid start to this map's series of records, but with a lot of deaths and some unrefined movement, there were a lot of improvements to be had. And that improvement came 2 days later, where DeLuca, one second. Sorry guys, my landlord called me and I gotta pay me some rent. And lucky for me, Raid Shadow Legends is sponsoring this video. Now, the thing about Raid is that it's completely free to play. You don't gotta spend a dime on this game if you don't want to. And there's an insane amount of champions that are consistently updated every month. And boy howdy do I love these champions. Every time I roll for them, I gotta get the best results, and I wanna help you. So here's my top 3 epic gamer tips to help you get the best champions. First, you gotta have a good sleep schedule. For me, I wake up at 6 AM so I feel nice and refreshed before I get to rolling some champions. Second gamer tip, brush your teeth at least twice a day. You gotta look your best whenever you're cheesing after pulling a legendary, you know? And lastly, make sure to get everything in the shower. You never know what kind of grime you got going on. And you wanna smell incredible just in case you get a beautiful woman in game. Ooh, but more importantly, Call of the Arbiter is in full swing right now. Look at this dude. Look how mighty he is. His name's Artak, and you can get him for absolutely free if you log into Raid for 7 days between now and the 24th of July. That's like a week after my birthday. I'm so excited. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, I have the perfect proposition for you. You can get this epic champion Knight Errant and some other cool things if you use the link in my description or scan the QR code. Anyways, over the next few days, DeLuca set 2 more records. These records were mostly just cleaning up the movement, but a few tricks were introduced as well. Another little demo dash near the beginning of spring that saves maybe a second or so, as well as a really interesting spike jump a bit later in spring, using a similar hitbox clip to demo dashing. Using these new tricks, as well as significantly less deaths, he was able to cut off a minute with a time of 13 minutes and 44 seconds. So far, Glyph seems to be a pretty cut and dry run. A few tricks, not too many, and a good amount of difficulty that makes getting a world record come purely from consistency and skill, or at least that's how it can seem from an outside perspective. Just 3 days after DeLuca's 1344, a new runner came into the scene. Comet625, a very skilled Celeste player who's in the top 20 of almost every major base game category, was able to execute some new and difficult strategies the community found to get a new record. Firstly, another demo dash was introduced in the summer section, where you can dash to another screen, then die immediately, but instead of spawning back where you came from, the game spawns you at the beginning of the new screen, assuming you'd been there before. This, combined with a really dope out-of-bounds jump in winter, some route optimizations in autumn, and much more refined movement, led to a time of 13:12, which easily could have been a low 12-minute time if he hadn't died as much. And the very next day, on May 13th, 2020, the low 12-minute time came, but not from Comet or DeLuca. This new record was set by one of the best Celeste speedrunners at the time, TGH. Even if you're not a fan of Celeste speedrunning, you might recognize his name from the top of many different leaderboards, from Undertale to Sonic to the majority of the 2D Zelda games. And as for leaderboards, Glyph was just another one for him to dominate. TGH's first record has an obvious increase in skill and consistency. The tricks he adds are very difficult, with another new demo and a very precise spike jump. And even though he opted to skip certain tricks like the early spring demo and some fancy moves in autumn, he was able to save almost a full minute, getting a time of 12:21, just by his insane movement and only dying 4 times, a huge improvement from prior records. And he didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, he set 3 more records, each improving on execution of the run and adding an insane amount of new strategies and time saves. Overall, he introduced 6 new demo dashes into the glyph route, each one harder than the last, as well as some incredible routing for some rooms in spring and autumn. With these time saves, he was able to bring the record down to a 10:56. He was so far ahead of everyone else that progress completely stalled on records a mere month after the map was released. After this, TGH moved on from Glyph, and after running Celeste for a bit longer, he moved on from running the game entirely. But he left an incredible legacy with his domination of Glyph, as no one else was nearly good enough to compete with his times. After that first hectic month of Glyph speedrunning, the leaderboards went dry. Until a year later, when a new player found the Glyph speedrun. WPX had only recently started submitting records on the official Celeste leaderboard, but pretty quickly gained interest in the Glyph run. Now, since she was pretty new to running the game, it was unlikely that she could just brute force the current route and get a better time than TGH, but WPX really liked to find strats, so that's what she did. The biggest time save she found was basically a cutscene skip. At the beginning and the end of the map, there are triggers that cause the game to slow down pretty significantly. At the beginning, you can just dodge the trigger, which saves a few seconds, nothing crazy. However, at the end of the map, it's a little different. Basically, you have to touch the trigger in order to beat the level, and normally there's around a 15-second time where the game is slowed down and you're just kind of waiting. But WPX found that by dashing up right through the trigger, you can exit on the right side a lot quicker than if you just went through it normally, which saves about 10 to 15 seconds depending on the setup. And other than that, she found many other skips to help save time. She skips the auto-scroller in winter with some extremely precise and impressive platforming. She skips entire rooms using very advanced movement mechanics such as reverse corner boosting, which just looks insane. Like, look at this. And she used insane demo dashes that allow her to skip huge sections of some rooms. But in order to get the world record, she had to do all of these tricks, as well as everything TGH found, with minimal deaths and almost perfect movement. And on top of that, she had a brand new opponent. Boss219 started running Glyph shortly after WPX did, and they were both dropping PBs like crazy. On September 2nd, 2021, WPX got a respectable time of 12:20, and on the same day, Boss got a time of 13:17. Now, I know this looks like a big time difference, especially considering how dense this run is of tricks, but of the 2 runners, Boss arguably had better mechanics, so it wasn't long before she caught up. Just 3 days later, on September 5th, Boss got an amazing new PB of 11 minutes and 35 seconds, cutting off over a minute and a half off her previous best. And then the day after, in 11:11. She was only 15 seconds off TGH's world record and looked to be the favorite to get it. But WPX still had a few more runs in her. 2 days later, she set a PB of 11:26, and 3 days after that, she was on an incredible run. She was nailing every demo dash, every skip, every optimization. Her summer split was the fastest she had ever run it, and by the end of winter, she was ahead of the world record and still had a lot of time to save in autumn. But then, the nerves got to her. She died 6 times in autumn and lost 20 seconds on the split, as well as her chance at the world record. And then, 3 days later, on September 14th, 2021, her opponent, Boss219, was able to clinch out the world record by 0.3 of a second. This run had just as good pace as WPX's last run, but she was able to finish it out with less mistakes. 2 months later, Boss came back to improve her run and got a time of 10 minutes and 47 seconds, breaking the next 10-second barrier. And that's where the world record is today. Or, well, actually, bear with me for a second. When I found this run and decided to make a video about it, I reached out to WPX for help researching and making sure my facts were correct. And while we were talking, she mentioned 2 new time saves that have been discovered since Boss's record back in 2021. The first is a super interesting skip that uses this interactable table near the beginning of Autumn. How it works is basically while you are interacting with any book or sign or cutscene in Celeste, you are put in a dummy state. In this state, all death planes are disabled. So if you can manage to build enough speed to fling yourself off the left side of the screen while you interact with a table, you can fall down to the screen underneath, skipping 2 entire screens and saving close to 20 seconds. And the second one is a bit complicated. It's called the pause buffered quad boost. Like, come on, that's just fun to say. The rundown of this one is that right before the end of the map, there's a moving platform that gives you momentum to jump across a large gap. However, if you chain 4 very specific jumps and dashes with multiple frame-perfect timings, you can trick the game into giving you the platform's momentum multiple times, which allows you to exit this jump with 5 times the speed of a dash. This also sets you up to where you can do a short jump after landing to gain even more speed and fly straight to the tower at the end. Originally, this was a TAS-only trick, but with the help of pausing to more consistently get the frame-perfect inputs, humans were able to pull this off. Or at least hypothetically, since WPX hadn't run the category since 2021. And so I left that conversation to start working on the script. But just a few days later, on June 9th, 2023, she messaged me to tell me that she'd been doing some runs again, and that in one of them, she pulled out all the stops. And that's how WPX finally claimed the world record that she'd been working towards for over 2 years. But she wasn't done yet. A week later, on June 17th, she had another run with insane pace. In the last record, she had lost around 15 seconds in summer, but this time around, she did it almost perfectly. And her memory was incredible as well, being the fastest anyone had ever completed the split. After she landed quad boost, she finished out the run with a time of 10 minutes and 22 seconds, completely skipping over the 10:30 barrier and proving to the community that maybe sub 10 is possible after all. I hope to see that achieved, but for now, that's the end of the speedrunning history of Glyph. And make sure to install Raid Shadow Legends using the QR code or the link in the description.